welcome to Rose Theater Weekly. I'm Christina Maroney, your host and the theater teacher at RHS. Before we get into our topic for the week, I wanted to take a moment to remind you, if you have not done your scheduling yet, if you're an RHS student, or if you are an 8th grader coming in as a freshman, please consider some of our classes in the theater department. You can find a whole listing of all of the classes I offer at my website, rhsdrama.com, or you can check out the video I made recently that is the middle school special edition of Rose Theater Weekly, where I talk about all of the classes that are specifically good for freshmen to take. So I hope to see you in the fall. So this week, we are going to be talking about the top 10 plays and musicals, and by top 10 I mean those that are most produced in high schools. There's a list that's put out every year. The Theater Education Association does a big poll of theaters from high schools all across the country asking what shows they do. So all of those schools report in, and then this top 10 list comes out every year, and it's really interesting to watch the trends. As a theater teacher who also directs the shows at our school, I don't choose my shows from this list, but it is interesting to pay attention to who's picking what and where have I seen that show before, or why have I never thought of reading that one. So we're going to get started with the list with the plays first. The top 10 spot is actually a tie between two plays. One of them is The Crucible, which some of you may have read in English already. If you haven't, you will. So that is a fictionalized version of the Salem witch trials. The other play that took that top 10 spot as a tie is called 12 Angry Men, or 12 Angry Women, or 12 Angry Jurors is what it's called now. It started as all men, and then since the casting has changed, they leave it open to 12 Angry Jurors, and anybody can play any character. But basically, it's about this group of jurors who hear a court case and then have to make a decision about is the person guilty or not, and 11 to 1 they say yes, they are guilty, but then one person dissents, and so it's asking about reasonable doubt and makes people really question what decisions are they making. Since there was a tie for number 9 and number 10, we go to spot number 8 for most produced high school plays of last year. And in spot number 8 is a play called Radium Girls. And this one is based on a true story about these female factory workers back in the early 1900s that eventually were poisoned and killed by using radium-based paint in the products that they were having to paint. Spot number 7 is She Kills Monsters, which is a fantasy play about a girl whose sister dies, and the sister was really into D&D. And so the girl feels like she didn't know her sister very well and decides to use her D&D campaign as a way to get to know her better. Spot number 6 is Clue, the play, not the musical that we did at UACT. And so it's the same basic story of the whodunit board game, but in play form. Spot number 5 goes to Alice in Wonderland, and there's a bunch of different versions of plays of Alice in Wonderland. There's not just one author that does this play. I've read probably 4 or 5 different scripts of Alice in Wonderland over the years, and they're all different authors and all different approaches. As you can imagine, there's a lot of material to work with there. Spot number 4, Our Town. Some people love it, some people don't. But that is basically the story of Grover's Corners, a very small town in middle America earlier in the century, and their lives and deaths and passings and what happens. Spot number 3 is Peter and the Starcatcher. This is the play I was planning to take students to this year, and then unfortunately we had to change our schedule that Oregon Shakespeare Festival is putting on. It's basically a prequel to Peter Pan, but it's been written much more recently. Spot number 2 goes to William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. If you haven't read this one, again, you probably will. One of Shakespeare's better known plays. And it's all about, there's mistaken identity and love triangles and, love squares, I guess, in this one. But lots of magical fairy folk in the woods, pretty much. And spot number 1 for the most produced plays in high school last year, it goes to Almost Maine by John Cariani. It's a lovely play. It is a series of vignettes, which are short scenes, and they can be played by 2 actors per scene, and then you can have a bunch of different people in the show. You can also have just a few actors, and they double up and do a bunch of scenes themselves as different characters. It's all about life in this small town of Almost Maine. John Cariani, as a side note, is a really well-known writer and actor on Broadway. And when I went to my workshops on Broadway 2 years ago, I actually got to take a playwriting course from him, which was amazing. And then this summer, I get to go back virtually and take the workshops, and he will be offering another one in writing. And so I'm excited to learn more from the man himself. So those are the top 10 plays produced in American high schools last year. Now let's move on to the musicals. Just like with the plays, the top 10 spot for musicals is a tie. One of those spots goes to Shrek, which many of you know, probably all of you. And you'll notice there's a fair number on this list that have been done around here pretty recently, Shrek being one of them that UAC did as their summer musical. The other top 10 tie spot for musicals goes to The Wizard of Oz, which a lot of you also know and love. Spot number 9 goes to Into the Woods. And if you don't know that show, it was done at UACT a few years ago. It was actually my first show at UACT when I moved back to Roseburg area. And a number of you came with me last year and saw it down at Southern Oregon University. But it's essentially the question of when you have fairy tales and you have a happily ever after, what's after happily ever after? And a lot of times it's not always as happy as you might think. Number 8 for top musicals is Seussical the Musical. This was the last show that Brad Allen directed at RHS before he retired, and it's the story of the Cat in the Hat and a bunch of other well-known Seuss characters. Spot number 7 goes to Little Shop of Horrors. Some of you may be familiar. It's a well-known movie that has Steve Martin as the dentist, and it's basically a mild-mannered plant shop worker meets a plant that's an alien, and then the alien is hungry for human flesh. It's this whole big thing with this very, nice sort of backup singer chorus involved. Number 6 is Newsies, which is the stage show based on the Disney movie, and basically it's about these boys in New York City, some of whom are homeless, who are newspaper delivery boys, and when a big publisher makes it harder for those guys to earn any money, they essentially go on strike. And so it's about their story. Generally speaking, when it's produced, tons of dancing. And so if you watch the stage version film, you will see that. Spot number 5 goes to Mary Poppins. And if you haven't seen Mary Poppins, the original, not Returns, you should definitely do that. It's a Disney movie, and if you are not already aware, UACT is planning to do that this summer. We'll see how that works out schedule-wise with everything going on, but there are plans for that show around here. Number 4, and going forward, have all been done in Roseburg in the last handful of years. So number 4 spot is Beauty and the Beast. You know the story. There's Belle and the Beast, because he was this prince and he was terrible and a curse was put on him, and then he hasn't had the curse lifted, and then, ooh, Belle shows up and she's bookish and charming, and ooh, he's kind of nice. Oh, you're kind of nice. Oh no, Gaston's a terrible tool, and things happen. So you know the rest of the story. If you don't, I don't want to spoil it for you. Spot number 3 goes to The Little Mermaid. It was my first musical that I put on as director at RHS 5 years ago, and then it was also done at Jacobi for UACT's summer musical a couple years after that. You all know The Little Mermaid. She loves the prince on land. He's like, ooh, that voice, and I'm going to sing a song about that voice. And then they fall in love, but then, ooh, there's Ursula, the awesome villain. And she takes Ariel's voice and things happen. You know. Spot number 2 hasn't technically been done yet, but is all but ready to go, which is Mamma Mia. And so UACT is working on that. We were supposed to have that go on pretty much now, and that schedule had to be changed. So that's in the works right now. An announcement will be made about that at some point. But Mamma Mia is basically a musical that takes all of ABBA's music. ABBA's this great Swedish band. If you don't know them, you should look them up. And tells the story of a girl who lives with her mother on a Greek island. It's beautiful, but she doesn't know who her father is. And she finds her mother's diary from when she was younger and decides it can be one of these 3 guys that her mom wrote about. And the daughter is getting married soon, and so she sends a letter to each of these three guys without telling mom. So they all show up and hijinks. And spot number 1 for the top 10 produced musicals in American high schools last year goes to The Addams Family. For being a sort of dark story, it's also very loving and funny, and the music is fantastic. If you like sort of discordant but still really pretty sounding music, Addams Family music does it. One of the other cool things you can look at is on this survey, it's been going since 1938. So you can actually find the data that goes back to that point, and you can look at trends by decade. So if you're sort of a data nerd, but still a creative type, like me, this is probably interesting to you. So basically, there is a website, you can track it down, and it's done by decade. So the most popular play, and they don't have it for musicals, but for plays, the most popular play done in the 1940s, the entire decade overall, was a play called You Can't Take It With You. Some of you may have heard of it. It's really well known because it's been done for so long. Even though it has been around a while, it's stuck around, and you'll see it on the list as we go forward. In the 1950s, the top produced high school play was Our Town, but I will point out that Curious Savage came in number 3 on this list, and Arsenic and Old Lace also came in at spot number 6. In the 1960s, Our Town wins again, but we also have Curious Savage, we have Arsenic and Old Lace, we also have Diary of Anne Frank on this list, and You Can't Take It With You. In the 1970s, You Can't Take It With You takes this number 1 spot, followed by Our Town, Arsenic and Old Lace, Harvey, Up the Down Staircase, and The Miracle Worker comes into play. Okay, this is going to sound familiar. For the 1980s, You Can't Take It With You takes the top spot, followed by Arsenic and Old Lace, The Curious Savage, The Miracle Worker, and Harvey. Getting into the 90s, we still have a lot of those same shows on the top list. Our Town is number 1. A Midsummer Night's Dream jumps in, and it lands at spot number 2, followed by You Can't Take It With You, Arsenic and Old Lace, Steel Magnolias comes in at spot number 5, and The Miracle Worker is at spot number 6. In the 2000s, 2000 to 2010, A Midsummer Night's Dream jumps into the number 1 spot. You Can't Take It With You is spot number 2, and that's followed by The Crucible, Arsenic and Old Lace, Rumors, and Our Town. Notice Our Town jumped a lot down the list there, and Midsummer Night's Dream sort of came out of nowhere, even though it's been around for hundreds of years, so I would assume it's probably some really good variations coming into play there, and people are realizing what you can actually do with it. So for the 2010s, which is of course then to now, the number 1 is Almost Maine, because that play was written in that decade, and so it has become wildly popular to produce at high schools. After that is A Midsummer Night's Dream, followed by Our Town, and then 12 Angry Jurors also made the list. The next spot is Crucible, and You Can't Take It With You. Those of you who saw my Facebook post about it on Wednesday may have noted that I said there's going to be a little bit of a hint drop for next year. So if you're one of my students, this will particularly interest you. I'm not saying which one, but I will say that one of the shows we're doing next year is on one of those lists that I've talked about today. So I will neither confirm nor deny which show that is, but if you want to play a fun guessing game just for kicks, go ahead and leave your thought in the comments below. Which of those shows do you think is one that we are going to be putting on at RHS next year? And you will be finding out what those 2 shows are later this month when I do my unveiling of those shows. But more about that next time. Until I see you then, stay safe, keep making art. Bye.